It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. A man's friendships are one of the best measures of his worth. The mystery of the beginning of all things is insoluble by us, and I for one must be content to remain an agnostic. To kill an error is as good a service as, and sometimes even better than, the establishing of a new truth or fact. It is a cursed evil to any man to become as absorbed in any subject as I am in mine. I love fools' experiments. I am always making them. At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. We can only see a short distance ahead, but we can see plenty there that needs to be done. A moral being is one who is capable of reflecting on his past actions and their motives. The highest possible stage in moral culture is when we recognize that we ought to control our thoughts. If the misery of the poor be caused not by the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin. The very essence of instinct is that it's followed independently of reason. I have called this principle, by which each slight variation, if useful, is preserved, by the term of natural selection. Freedom of thought is best promoted by the gradual illumination of men's minds, which follows from the advance of science. Man is descended from a hairy quadruped, furnished with a tail and pointed ears, probably arboreal in its habit. There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers, having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one. Animals, whom we have made our slaves, we do not like to consider our equal. The love of all living creatures is the most noble attribute of man. In the long history of humankind, those who learned to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed. What a book a devil's chaplain might write on the clumsy, wasteful, blundering, low, and horribly cruel works of nature. Till recently hardly a single change in structure or instinct had been observed in any single species which could not be shown to be useful to that species. The highest possible stage in moral culture is when we recognize that we ought to control our thoughts. I cannot persuade myself that a beneficent and omnipotent God would have designedly created parasitic wasps. False facts are highly injurious to the progress of science, for they often long endure. Man tends to increase at a greater rate than his means of subsistence. We can allow satellites, planets, suns, universe, nay whole systems of universes to be governed by laws, but the smallest insect, we wish to be created at once by special act. I am turned into a sort of machine for observing facts and grinding out conclusions. In the struggle for survival, the fittest win out at the expense of their rivals. The highest possible stage in moral culture is when we recognize that we ought to control our thoughts. I love fools' experiments. I am always making them. To kill an error is as good a service as, and sometimes even better than, the establishing of a new truth or fact. A man who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life. Great is the power of steady misrepresentation. An American monkey, after getting drunk on brandy, would never touch it again, and thus is much wiser than most men. The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference.